there's a friend of mine who's hosting an online event. I think starts this week called the Holistic Attachment Summit online, and he sent me some clips because we like having these psychological conversations. And he was saying he's spoken to a lot of experts like yourself recently that have said there might be this myth of self-regulation, meaning like a lot of it has to do with co-regulation because it's easier to regulate yourself when you're alone. But people are wonderful and people are also a pain in the ass. And so it's this idea that sometimes we can't self-regulate in an environment with someone who is either provoking or maybe completely dysregulated themselves, because the way I interpret it is that sometimes it's a bit of a defense mechanism if you're trying to self-regulate and someone's having a meltdown.
Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly right. And in fact, that's my argument about why our policy about domestic violence needs to use marital therapists or needs to work on both members of the couple in terms of self-regulation. Because I mean, what's been going on for years was they would treat the man who was a designated offender, and half these guys would come into our treatment group and say, "Listen, okay, I'll do it, but what about my wife? She's got these problems too." And in a lot of times that would just be put down as victim blaming, but we would actually take it seriously and say, well, we can't do anything about your wife because she's not here, but we can teach you some regulation skills that will help you to cope with her. But of course, it would have been much better if, in fact, the wife had a problem. She was in therapy too. The two people get it, and then you get them back together, and you've worked out pacts and you've worked out conflict management strategies
Right.
for the couple. And if someone violates it, then you pick that up in the next therapeutic session. You say, why did this go wrong? How can we keep this from happening again? And you just keep working on it. And after a while, because people get caught in these conflict toxic events, right, where each one has to be right and the other one's got to be right, and it gets to the screaming stage, and then it gets to the physical violence stage. In Oregon, they did something called the Oregon Youth Study. Deborah Capaldi was the researcher of this, and they were tracing fairly young people from their late teens up to their late 20s for a long period of time. And many of these couples would be in abusive relationships. And most of the time it would be yelling and screaming and verbal abuse. And then sometimes it would spill over into low-level physical abuse. And sometimes it would get slightly beyond that. And when it got beyond the normal level of conflict, the police would be called. 85% of the time, the man would be arrested. In Oregon, which is a dual arrest state, so theoretically, they could have arrested both members of the couple. But the stereotype is so strong that they arrested the man. So, and then, of course, feminists say, well, look at the police statistics. Men are the ones that are doing all the domestic violence. Well, yeah, because police are just arresting the man and not the woman. But, I mean, here you've got a study that had been tracing these people for years and knew that the abuse was two-way. And
That's crazy.
And when the police were pulled in, the man got arrested. So now you've got this guy who's in a abusive. You take him into treatment, and then you send him back into the same situation that he left with a woman who's got her own problems with abusiveness. Any criminologist will tell you if you send someone back into a criminogenic setting, they're going to be likely to repeat the crime. It's a no-no. And so why are we doing that?
Wow. So we're taking someone that is perhaps just in a two-way toxic relationship, and what we're doing is we're leaving the woman at home, we're putting the man into jail, and then, like you said, it really changes the courses of their life. Instead of like getting them both therapy or just getting them out of that relationship, which would probably help a lot of the situation, but instead we're turning, I don't want to say innocent, but we're turning a lot of men towards criminality, anger, resentment, and long-term mental health issues just on this issue. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean,
that's crazy. That's intense.
Yeah, what I'm saying is you're treating this guy as so he was the sole problem, and then you're sending him back into a relationship where he's only half the problem and she's the other half, and nothing's happened with her. She received no treatment. She's treated as this innocent victim, blah, blah, blah. And suddenly he's back dealing with the same stuff again. He's more likely to repeat. He's more likely to be a recidivist. And then he gets for being a recidivist.
Right. Not to mention that if he has this on his record and he's being treated like that, then narratively in his mind, he's going to start telling himself that he's this awful person, that he's done these things, and then he has this identity of being an abuser and violent and all of these things. It seems like quite a like the slipperiest of slopes. That's super sad. And there's nothing that's being changed in the system for this.
No, I mean, I can't see it happening. I mean, I go back to this case I'm doing in Vancouver. I'm dealing with this guy who's kind of a perfect example. He's been violent twice in his life. Once was he grew up with an abusive father, and the father apparently was horrendous. I mean, we started to touch on some of the stuff the father did. And when he was 14, he decided, I'm mad as hell. I can't take this anymore. He fought back against the father. So they took him out and threw him into a youth home. Part of that being the parents didn't want him. I mean, so not only was he abused, he was unwanted.
Wow.
So he gets kicked around from youth homes and he's out on the streets and he's a drug addict for part of his life. He gets in this relationship with this woman who's a sex worker on the side, and she's got all kinds of problems on the side. She gets arrested 5 times and they drop the charges every time. And then he assaults her after she bites him. And now he's facing charges. So he's been abused.
What?
He's been violent twice in his life and been punished both times by the system. But other people who've been violent to him throughout his life have never been punished. Not once. Not once.
That's going to create a very, very angry person.
Yeah, he's surprisingly okay. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would expect this guy that would have acted out more, but he's got no police record. There's no record of violence. He's put up with it, but I mean, he's got this sort of matter-of-fact attitude. But yeah, the system has screwed him big time. And I mean, I just think that's the situation in Canada. That's how bad it is.
Wow, I really had no idea that Canada was treating domestic violence and men in such a way.
Canada is way up the track when it comes to getting out of the gender paradigm, which is, the idea that it's all male perpetrated to protect the patriarchy. And, this is just political thinking it's contradicted by the evidence, contradicted at every turn.